The chamber was larger than any city hall on earth. Its ceiling curved like a sleeping whale. Rings of seats rose one above the other. Each seat held a delegate. Flags and symbols floated on thin poles. Lights came from no single place. They came from many places at once. The light made skin and scales and metal gleam. Earth's small delegation stood near the base of the rings. They felt very small. Around them sat beings that had names like sentences. Some breathed air. Some breathed fog. Some did not breathe at all. Many did not look like life the humans had seen in books. The Grand Council had ruled for millennia. It had kept peace between stars. Today, it had invited Earth to speak. Other species had brought great gifts. A tall envoy set a sphere on the floor. The sphere opened and showed a map of 1,000 trade routes. Someone else laid down a ribbon of metal that sang when it moved. One gift looked like a knife made of sun. The counselors nodded. This was how the world worked. Gifts were proofs. Gifts showed power, art, history. The human diplomat walked forward with two small objects in his hands. He wore a suit that did not shine. He moved like a man who had practiced a speech at home. He smiled a little. The smile was honest, not polished. He placed his items on a small table. One was a carved wooden figure, smooth and worn by years of holding. The other was a thin, flat device. It looked like a small book made of glass and plastic. It did not glow like the other gifts. It did not hum with power. It looked fragile. 1,000 eyes turned to the human. Cameras in the hall focused. The human lifted the device. He set his finger on a round mark. A light blinked. A soft sound began. At first it was only a rhythm. It felt like small rain on a tin roof. Then a voice joined. The voice sang in human language. The words were old and clear. The song was simple. It was not about war or gods. It spoke about walking home and about small bright things called memories. Some delegates relaxed. A being with glass eyes that looked like stars smiled. A creature with many arms tapped the rhythm with its fingers. But not all could take the sound. Some species had no ears. They did not hear music the way humans did. For them, the sound touched other parts of their bodies. The song made tiny lights appear under their skin. For others, the rhythm matched the way they thought. The music moved something inside them. An old war machine, left as a relic near an exit, started to hum in answer. A guard rose. It was tall and made of metal and old brass. Its movement was slow and exact. It moved like a statue learning to walk. It came toward the human and pointed a long arm. The arm was a tool and a threat. The guard's voice was a single tone. "Surrender device," it said. Its voice did not need to be loud. It was a command. The human diplomat kept his hand on the device. He did not look scared. He did not try to hide the device. He closed his eyes for a moment. The song changed. It grew fuller. The singer's voice seemed to step back and let other sounds join, low hums like ships, small cracks like a fire in a stove, a laugh like a child hiding. The music filled the chamber like warm air. A delegate on the third ring stood up and threw his gift to the floor. It shattered. The sound of breaking glass mixed with the music. Someone at the back gasped. A young representative who had watched the feed from a remote station laughed with a sound like a squeak. The elders in their robes did not move. Their faces made no change, but their eyes were wide. The guard reached the table. Its arm hovered above the device. The diplomat opened his eyes. He met the guard's gaze. He spoke, softly, in a language few could understand. He said, "Listen." The device's small screen flashed one word in simple English. It was not a long word. It sat there like a seed, "Listen." At that second, something shifted. The High Arbiter, who had not leaned forward in public for 100 years, leaned. A murmur went around the rings. Phones and viewers in a million places outside the hall paused. For many species, a single word had no great power. For humankind, the word was a polite demand. For some other species, that single word reached into old stories. It tugged like a hand on a rope. Outside the chamber, feeds had begun to pick up small signals. On a freighter halfway to the next system, a mechanic paused with grease on her hands to listen. In a city on a planet where music was forbidden, a child hid behind a stall and hummed. The sound that started in the chamber moved like light. It moved without permission. The guard's arm trembled. Not from fear. From confusion. Its sensors found nothing harmful in the device. Its code could not say if music could be a weapon. The room waited. The council rules were clear. Gifts could be inspected. Gifts could be seized. Gifts could be used as evidence. But the council had never met music like this. The human diplomat closed his eyes again. He let the song finish one line, then another. When the last note faded, the room did not fall silent. Many listeners sat still. Some wiped something from their eyes. The High Arbiter's hand lay on the arm of his chair. He had heard many melodies in his life, calls of birds, the beat of storms on 1,000 seas, the cry of newborns in species that did not sleep. But this sound carried something else. It carried a path to memory. It carried an offer. Someone near the edge of the rings muttered a word that the humans did not understand. A debate would start before the day ended. Laws would be said, papers would be moved. But for a single heartbeat, the entire hall had been small and simple as a living room. A song had done that. The cameras kept rolling. The device's screen stopped blinking. On it, another simple line waited, like a pause between breaths. It read, "Play next." The song from the human chamber did not end when the hall fell silent. Cameras had carried the sound. Recorders had copied it. By the time the High Arbiter leaned back in his seat, the song was already leaving the chamber and entering space. On a mining world, deep under the crust, workers played the broadcast during their break. The heavy beat echoed against stone walls. Men and women with dust on their faces tapped their boots without thinking. Some laughed at themselves. Some kept tapping even after the sound stopped. In a pirate port, smugglers traded a copy of the track for drinks. They thought it was only noise. But the rhythm stayed with them. A drunk mercenary hummed it as he staggered out of the bar. A rival followed him, ready to fight, then paused. Something about the sound pressed against memory. He lowered his knife. The playlist had escaped. And like fire, it spread. In the council, arguments burned hotter than plasma. A tall diplomat from a species of crystal stood. Light pulsed across her body in sharp anger. "This is not a gift. This is manipulation," she declared. Another voice, softer but firm, answered. It came from a small being that looked like mist. "No. This is bridge building. It connects us in ways our words have failed." The chamber filled with noise. Half the delegates feared the humans had introduced a hidden weapon. The other half believed Earth had given them a tool of peace. The human diplomat stood quiet. He held the device in both hands, like someone carrying a candle in the dark. He said only one line. Listen before you decide. Meanwhile, back on Earth's ship, a young technician sat in front of screens. He wore old headphones. His fingers tapped as wave maps danced across glass. He saw patterns in the sound. Not only melody. Not only voice. He saw something else. Look at this, he called. Others leaned over his shoulder. The song had layers. Hidden inside the music were small shifts in rhythm, like gentle knocks against invisible doors. Some beats matched electromagnetic bands used by old machines. Others touched frequencies close to brain signals. It was not command. It was not control. But it was suggestion. Comfort. A pull toward calm, or sorrow, or courage. Humans had not added these layers on purpose. They were simply there, born of how humans had shaped songs for centuries. But in a galaxy of minds tuned so differently, the effects could be sharp. News spread faster than ships. On one world, rival gangs stopped fighting because they began humming the same tune. On another, a religious leader declared the music dangerous. It stirs what must remain still, he said. It is a poison. His people set fire to speakers in their streets. On a distant colony, violence broke out. A bomb destroyed a council house. Whispers said the attackers had listened to the playlist before they struck. Was it true? Or only rumor? No one knew. But fear grew. In the Grand Council, the crystal diplomat slammed the floor with her sharp hand. See? Already chaos spreads. Humans have loosed something they cannot control. The mist being rose again. Its voice drifted like wind over water. Or perhaps they have given us a mirror. Do not fear the reflection. The High Arbiter listened to both sides. He had lived long enough to know fear when he saw it. He had also lived long enough to know hope. The song carried both. He ordered the humans to prove their intent. Show us this is not weaponry. Show us it is not command. If you fail, the council will ban your transmissions. And perhaps, ban you. The human diplomat bowed his head. We will show you, he said. But inside, his heart raced. He knew proving innocence in a hall of fear was like proving the sun was not fire. That night, the technician on the human ship listened again. Alone. He slowed the track until each beat sounded like a heavy drop of water. He closed his eyes. He thought of his childhood, of long car rides, of his mother's humming, of soldiers marching in parades. He realized something. Music had always been a kind of map. A way for humans to share feelings across walls, across wars, across generations. Now, for the first time, that map was reaching other species. And the roads it opened, could not be closed. On a freighter crossing dark space, an alien worker recorded himself singing the human tune. His voice was rough, broken, but true. He sent the recording home to his mate. She played it again and again. It became the first song in their family's history. On another world, a warlord smashed a transmitter. His soldiers obeyed. But later, when he walked alone, he found himself tapping his claw against stone. The beat had stayed inside him. He growled in anger. Back in the council, a vote was called. Should the playlist be banned? Should humans be censored before more damage spread? The rings of delegates lit up as each voice cast their choice. Green for ban, blue for free use, red for delay. The votes flickered like stars in motion. The tension in the hall was thick. The human diplomat held the device close. He watched the lights, his breath tight. Whatever the result, he knew one truth: the galaxy had already heard. Even if the council chose silence, the echo would not stop. The tally moved closer to the end. Green. Blue. Red. One last vote remained. The chamber held its breath. A young technician named Mara worked late in the ship's lab. The ship hummed around her like a sleeping animal. Screens glowed. Wires ran like small rivers. Mara loved sound maps. She liked to slow songs until hidden shapes appeared. Tonight she fed the playlist into a new program. The program colored the waves in bright lines. That is when she saw it. The melody had a pattern inside it. Not words. Not music the ear could pick out. Tiny beats repeated in a way that matched prime numbers. 2, 3, 5, 7 small clusters that appeared like steps. Mara frowned. She ran the test again. She slowed the track. She sped it up. The pattern stayed. She called her friend Joe. Joe came with coffee and a tired grin. "What is that?" Joe asked. Mara pointed at the screen. "It is not a message," she said. "It is a fingerprint. A structure that makes certain systems like to follow the beat." Joe tapped keys. "It could nudge machines. It could nudge minds that work like ours." They both grew quiet. Mara did not tell the council yet. She did not know the cost of saying it out loud. She only knew this: the playlist had a code. It folded into melody like a secret tucked into cloth. Word spread to the human science team. The lead scientist, old and gray, read the patterns and then stared at the wall map long enough to make his coffee cool. "This is not a weapon," he said slowly. "But it is influence. Rhythm that finds things tuned to the same pulse." He thought of ships that woke when they heard certain tones. He thought of machines that remembered the songs their makers had taught them. He thought of the way children calmed when a parent hummed. Across the galaxy, a small allied species called the Kaith lived with many small prisons. The Kaith had been slaves long ago. Now they kept secret jails for old enemies. A Kaith diplomat who had once met the human playlist watched the waveforms and felt something open inside his chest. He used a copy of the track to time a small signal that matched the brain rhythm of the prison warders. At the right moment, the song rolled through the halls like a soft wind. Guards forgot, machines blinked, locks cooled. Prisoners slipped free. It was a brave and kind thing. It was also illegal. The council had rules. Changing or controlling another species without permission was a grave crime. The Kaith celebrated in the dark alleys. The freed people called it miracle. But when the story reached the Grand Council, a red flag rose. "How dare they use our music as a key?" the crystal diplomat shouted. "They break law with a tune." The mist being answered, voice low, "They free people. What law is higher than rescue?" The debate cut into the night. It split the halls like a sudden storm. Humans felt both pride and dread. They had never meant the playlist to open prisons. They had meant to share songs. But sound had always done work for humans. It soothed, it rallied, it warned. The new discovery showed that songs could cross a line humans had not known existed. They had given the galaxy something that could be used as medicine or as lockpick. Inside the council, the security chief, an animal with many small eyes and a mouthful of metal teeth, watched the votes and the stories. He smelled danger like his kind smelled smoke. He proposed a plan. "We must control all transmissions from Earth," he said. We must have copies. We must test. We must stop surprises. Many nodded. Control sounded safe. Control sounded clean. Some delegates shouted against the idea. Control is power, said a small speaker from a distant trade world. You would make music a weapon by owning it. The security chief only tightened his grip on the rulebook. He had watched wars begin for less. Mara watched the council feed in the lab. She felt small. She wrote a note to the diplomat, "We need consent rules. We need safe lists." Her fingers trembled. She thought of the Kaith freeing prisoners. She thought of the prison doors opening to light. She thought of the old scientist saying rhythm is like a map. She thought of the security chief saying control. Outside, the playlist did not sleep. Copies lived in the memory of freighter pilots, in the earbuds of children, in the coaxial heart of old machines. For weeks, the same beats began to align across many places. Radio relays in orbit picked them up. Ship logs recorded tiny timing marks that matched the prime number clusters Mara had found. The tracks began to play in sync by accident in places so far apart that no one could believe it was random. On a dark moon, a farmer turned on a low-frequency speaker to call his herds. The beat matched a distant ship's transmitter. For a moment, machines far apart hummed together like a chorus. Lights blinked. A rusted automaton somewhere woke and walked a single step. A museum piece in a forgotten yard blinked its eyes and whispered an old greeting in a voice no one had heard for centuries. People noticed. Some were afraid. Some were thrilled. The idea spread that the playlist was building something, a network of rhythm that touched minds and machines. Scientists called it a humming net. Poets called it a web of memory. Generals called it a problem. Late one night, as Mara worked, her screen filled with a new map. The dots, little points where the beat had matched, began to connect. Lines formed between systems, thin and bright, until a pattern lay over the galaxy like a small net. Mara felt her throat tighten. The net was not complete. It had holes. But its shape was clear. It reached toward the council hall where the human gifts had first played. She sent a message to the diplomat. She hit send and watched the tiny light spin. Outside the lab window, a freighter's hull began to hum in time with a song 2 systems away. Mara put her hands over her face for a moment. She thought of the Kaith prisoners stepping into the night and the security chief sharpening his voice. She thought of the net and its power to help and to harm. Somewhere far beyond the visible stars, an old machine woke to the same rhythm. Its systems thought in angles older than any current language. It turned a single gear. In the council, votes still waited. The playlist had become a map. But maps can lead to refuge. Maps can lead to traps. The light on Mara's console pulsed. The net's lines glowed. The next move would not be only political or scientific. It would be human. Sirens did not scream that morning. Speakers sang. Across 3 systems, alarms brightened decks and ports. But the lights did not guide missiles. They guided sound. Fleets turned their noses outward and opened panels. Once, war began with fire. Now fleets opened speakers the size of houses and pointed them like guns. On the bridge of a cruiser, the alien admiral's hands hovered above his controls. He had fought battles measured in burns and shrapnel. Today he listened. The human playlist rolled out over a low tone that fit the rhythm of his childhood lullaby, only it came from a different world. His throat tightened. In the corner of his mind, a memory of a child's small hand reached him. He could not aim well. He slowed the order to fire. On a human destroyer, the captain watched viewscreen lines stutter. Targeting arrays pulsed and drifted as sensors tried to ignore the music. Guns that had tracked for hours missed by meters. The captain felt something odd, an ache for a home he had not seen in years. He closed his eyes. He thought of a song his grandmother sang. He stayed his hand. Far below on a planet, soldiers found their helmets filled with sound. Waves set metal plates to sing. The singer's voice bled into the machines. Guidance systems hiccuped like old radios. Fighters missed their marks. Commanders cursed. For the first time in recorded history, shields fell from shame, not from fire. But not every species listened the same way. A race with no ears, the Voron, felt sound as pressure in bone and shell. Where human music calmed a human mind, it drove the Voron mad with blurred motion. Their bodies acted faster than thought. They smashed transmitters with great stone hands. They dove into speakers and chewed them open. Noise could not reach their hearts. Their fury reached speakers first. Fighting became strange and terrible. Some battles ended when commanders remembered a child and lowered weapons. Others began when a species could not be moved by memory and used brute force to silence every speaker in reach. Ships were boarded not for guns but for amplifiers. Boarding parties carried hammers and saws. They ripped wires. A chorus of engineers died with solder still warm on their fingers. Humans watched from the center of the storm. They had chosen sound to reach the council. They had hoped for peace. They did not want war. Yet their music had become a new kind of weapon, non-lethal for some, lethal for others. The human government met in a cold room. Faces in the room were pale and hard. "Turn it off," one minister said. "We did this." "Turn it all off and hide the devices." "No," another replied. "If we stop, we lose our only power to protect the planet." The diplomat who had first pressed play stood at the window. He had played a song to show care. Now armies used that care to win battles. He felt hunted. Generals wanted him for strategy. Zealots wanted him for blame. He decided he must protect the source. The source was simple and small. A handful of servers, a device wrapped in old cloth. It sat in a vault on a ship. The diplomat moved it to a hidden room. He also hired guards, humans and allies who had felt the playlist as kindness. They kept watch with tired eyes. Still, saboteurs struck. An extremist group cut a relay in a trade lane. Their message claimed a holy duty: silence the singers. Another group broadcast a fake track, a corrupt version that mixed discordant beats with images that did not belong together. People who heard it lost their balance. Some grew angry and violent. A small town on a mining world nearly burned because a crowd went mad after the corrupted song played over a market speaker. Mara watched these events on a feed. She felt guilty. The pattern she had found, those prime number beats, had not been a weapon. But it made things possible. She sat in her chair and thought. If music could be tuned to calm, it could also be tuned to hurt. She thought of the Kaith freeing prisoners with a song. She thought of the Voron smashing transmitters. The net she had seen on the map had edges now, sharp as knives. On a ruined moon, the Diplomats' guards fought off a strike team that used sound bombs, small devices that burst with 1,000 offbeat notes. The guards covered their ears, but the diplomat only whispered for calm. He set the device on a table and played a human lullaby, raw, unencoded, honest. The song softened the edges of panic. One attacker lowered his blade, wept, and walked away. Another was not moved at all. The diplomat realized truth was not a shield that worked all the time. Across space, an old ship from the Council's fleet began to hum. It had been silent for ages. The playlist's rhythm matched a single gear worn to an old memory. The ship woke and aimed its guns at the system that had played the corrupted track. It could not tell hatred from protection. Its code only followed the closest rule: defend the Council. The galaxy grew smaller at the edges. Borders once safe for trade now required sound checks. Smugglers used lullabies to get past patrols. Revolutions used songs to free people. Fanatics used noise to burn towns. The Council tried to respond, but its rules bent slowly and unevenly. For some delegates, the idea of banning music felt like an intrusion into culture. For others, control felt like the only safe path. One night, a broadcast came from a place no one expected. It was not a human voice. It was not a council member. It was a voice wrapped in static and old memory. The track played a melody that matched the prime pattern, and underneath it, something darker pulsed. The corrupted melody crossed systems in minutes. In a refugee camp, a father who had kept his rage for years snapped. In a shipyard, workers who had once hummed together now shouted. Small fights began to flare like oil. Mara saw the feed go red. She saw the map lines light up where the corrupted track had hit. The diplomat smelled the change like smoke. Guards tightened their fingers on rifles. The playlist had turned from tool to battlefield. The next move would decide whether it stayed a song or became a war. The last image that night was of the corrupted track's waveform on a lab screen. It looked wrong. It had holes where kindness should be. The net that had once seemed a possible bridge now showed a new pattern, one that could break bones as easily as open doors. Someone, somewhere, had learned how to make people listen the wrong way. The frequency war had not even begun. It had already found its first victims. The corrupted track had left scars. Towns burned. Friendships broke. The council argued until their voices were hoarse. The playlist that began as a greeting had become a weapon in some hands and a tool in others. People on many worlds asked the same hard question: what do you do when the thing that healed can also hurt? The human diplomat stood in a ruined plaza that still smelled of smoke. He held the small device that had started it all. It was dusty now, edges nicked from hands that had gripped it in anger and fear. Around him, children who had learned the human songs months before hummed softly. Some of those children had seen violence. Some had seen kindness. The diplomat looked at the faces and felt the weight of a choice. Inside the council, leaders had one plan: strip the humans of their broadcasts, seize their servers, and lock every song behind codes and tests. That plan promised safety. It also promised the slow forgetting of what the playlist had given: small moments of connection, shared laughter, a map to each other's homes. On the human ship, the ministers argued. If we hand this to them, one said, they will use it as a tool to rule us. If we hide it, another said, we lose our chance to make friends. The diplomat listened and then spoke little. He remembered the miner who had tapped his boot, the freed Kaith who had walked into light, the Vorin who smashed speakers because they could not hear. He remembered the guards who had wept when a lullaby touched them. He chose neither hiding nor surrender. He chose honesty. The diplomat asked for one last chance. He asked the council for a single broadcast, under guard, on neutral ground. The council agreed reluctantly. Delegates came with weapons and with worry. Journalists and smugglers and scholars watched from the edges. The human ship prepared a broadcast station and a secure relay. Mara sat at the console. She had helped find the pattern that had frightened them. She had helped free prisoners. She had seen the net form and the wounds it left. She now edited the final list. She removed the hidden timing marks. She cut the prime number nudges out of the tracks. She left only voices, farmers singing while they milked beasts, children in classrooms laughing, an old woman humming as she washed her hands, a soldier who had come home and found his child asleep on his chest. The songs were plain. They carried no secret rhythm to push machines or minds. They carried truth. The relay went live. People far from the hall tuned in. The device in the diplomat's hand glowed. He pressed play. The music that flowed out was small and honest. It did not demand. It did not try to fix old wars in a single minute. It offered stories. It offered moments. A trade worker who had always thought humans crude smelled a memory and smiled. A general who had lost a brother heard a voice that sounded like the song his sister used to hum and closed his eyes. Not everyone was moved. A fanatic on a border world heard nothing but noise and stayed angry. A Voron brigadier smashed every speaker in his camp and turned away. But enough people felt something they had not felt in years. Enough hands unclenched. Enough radios went quiet because the men who tended them had found a place inside their chest that remembered a sunlit room, a warm hand, a safe harbor. As the honest playlist traveled, small things changed. A blockade lifted because two commanders spoke, not because a ship fired. A protest met police who put down their shields and listened, then walked home. In a prison, a guard who had fed on hate for decades slowed his walk and found he could not shout at a prisoner who whistled a human tune. The Caith used the honest music to teach freed people to sing new names for themselves, names without chains. The council watched these effects and found that not all power came from control. A new voice rose among the delegates. It was neither mist nor crystal. It was a small, stubborn voice that asked, "What if we make rules about consent? What if we let species choose when to hear and when to refuse?" The idea sounded simple, but it changed the argument. People could still fear music. But some could choose to listen. A treaty followed, clumsy, long, but real. It set rules. Songs could not carry hidden layers that nudged minds or machines without consent. Broadcasts that affected whole systems needed checks. Cultural exchange could continue with clear markers that told listeners what they would hear. The council did not fix everything. It could not stop the fanatic. It could not rebuild all that burned. But it made a new path. Back in the ruins, the diplomat walked among people who had stayed. He met eyes that had once glared. He met hands that had once wanted to seize his device. He played a slow song from a child's handheld recorder. The music was small. It fit into a pocket and into a smile. A Voron elder passed by and, for a breath, his shoulders relaxed. He did not sing. He did not forgive. He only watched. But watching was a start. The human device's screen flashed one last message: share or stop. The diplomat did not answer with a code. He answered with a choice. He uploaded the raw list to a secure archive. He attached clear labels: plain human songs, no hidden timing, consent required. He offered help to set consent systems for other species. He left the playlist open for those who wanted it and locked for those who did not. In the days after, small communities made new rules. Some banned music in public spaces. Some made song licenses who could play what and when. A merchant guild in one system made a playlist for traders that taught languages by rhythm. A school used songs to heal children from war. And in a quiet system at the galaxy's edge, a species that had no ears watched the events with careful, cold interest. They did not feel the music. They felt the change. They saw how a small, honest thing could move worlds. They marked it in their records. That species made a note in a file kept for things to watch. The file's title was a single word in their old speech, curiosity. The diplomat closed his eyes. He had not saved everyone. He had not stopped pain. But he had done something his people valued, he had given choice. The galaxy did not become a place of peace overnight. It became, slowly, a place where music could be asked for and refused. Where songs could be gifts and not weapons. Where humans, who had meant only to share a playlist, taught others how to say yes and no. On the device's screen, the last line glowed softly, "Play next."